There was a moment during an investigation where I felt like I was about to lose control of myself.
Shadows grow on the wall.
Not because of something I saw, but something I felt.
Silence answers my call.
A pressure, like I needed to speak, but without knowing what I would say. It happened inside the old isolation hospital in Gosport, in a small room built around a Ouija board.
A memory fading into obscurity.
Listen to hear how that moment quickly became something I didn't fully understand. Please note, our episodes are best experienced with headphones. You're listening to the Beyond Haunted UK podcast, and before we begin, if you enjoy these stories, please follow Beyond Haunted UK on all available podcast providers and across social media. Your support generally does help the podcast grow. Now, this episode may contain themes of mental illness, trauma, human suffering, or details relating to true crime. Please listen with care. My name is Jamie, and this is Beyond Haunted UK, where we explore history, belief, true crime, and the unexplained through the lens of the human experience. I always ask you to please listen with an open mind. Now, there was a moment during one of our investigations where I generally felt like I was about to lose control of myself. Now, this was not in a way that was welcome, and not particularly in a way that you'd see in films. But it was in a moment of stillness and in a very real way, like something was building just beneath the surface. This happened at the old isolation hospital in Gosport, located on Monk's Walk. Now, it was a place that even in daylight, it felt separate from everything else around it. It had low, dilapidated buildings, lots of empty space, and a kind of silence that doesn't really feel natural. Now, we'd gone there out of curiosity. It was still new to us as a venue, as an up-and-coming investigation team. And like a lot of places, you hear things. Stories about what used to happen there. People being kept apart, illness, death, and at the very far end, what people referred to as the morgue. But it wasn't originally built as one. During outbreaks, particularly at a time where diseases like smallpox were feared and poorly misunderstood, spaces like this were repurposed, used when they had to be. The hospital itself existed because of that fear. Now, in coastal areas like Portsmouth and Gosport, there was always a risk. Ships arriving into Portsmouth Harbour brought trade, but they also brought illness. When cases were suspected, people weren't treated in the main towns. They were removed, taken away from the public. They were isolated. Now, facilities like the one on Monk's Walk were part of that system. Separate, controlled environments designed to contain infectious diseases like smallpox, scarlet fever, and tuberculosis. Patients would be transported away from the harbour and away from their homes, and they were often brought to somewhere like this. And in places built for isolation, death wasn't unusual. So rooms were used differently, practically, not because they were meant to be morgues, but because at times they simply had to be. Now, at first it didn't feel like anything, just another abandoned building with cold walls, peeling paint, and that familiar smell of damp and neglect. Now, one section had been used as a gym. It looked like it hadn't really changed much since the 1960s. Now, the previous owner, Don, his portrait still hung on the wall like a reminder of what this place used to be. and at the back of the complex stood an old building with 2 separate rooms. It had single glazed windows and air that was as cold as ice. You'd walk in expecting something, but nothing really happened. And sometimes, that's where your mind starts filling in the gaps. Now I remember sitting inside one of those rooms, and it was the most infamous of them all, and we called it the Ouija room. Now for clarity, the room was small, it was painted black, it had long thin mirrors that ran along the walls, and it could fit around 5 people, and even that was a bit of a squeeze. In the middle sat a round table with a homemade Ouija board. I wasn't saying much at the time, just taking it all in, listening, as we began the investigation with members of the public. And then the air changed. Not around me, but in me. It's difficult to explain properly because there wasn't a sound, there wasn't a voice, there wasn't anything I could point to and say, that's what caused it. But there was this sudden feeling, like something was rising. My chest began to feel tight, and not through panic and not through anxiety. It was just pressure. It felt like I needed to say something or do something. But at the time, I just didn't know what. And the more I sat there, the stronger that feeling became. It wasn't like I was hearing words. It was more like the urge to speak, and without really knowing what I would say. Now I started to move in my seat. My body, my posture, it changed. My face felt heavier, older, and angrier. And now that's the part that really stayed with me because it didn't feel like a thought I was choosing. It felt like something trying to come through. But this time, it didn't have permission. And in that moment, I remember thinking, if I let this happen, I don't know what comes next. So, I didn't. I just got up and left. Physically and mentally, I moved away from where I was sitting. I broke that stillness and just stopped. And then almost immediately, it faded. Not slowly. It was just gone. Like whatever that build-up was had nowhere to go anymore. Now, one of the members of the public, someone we'd become close with, now she noticed the change and she said to me, I think something was trying to come through you. And in that moment, I simply agreed. Now after that, everything felt normal again. The same building, the same silence, but I wasn't in the same headspace anymore. We left not long after, and the old isolation hospital quickly became one of the most haunted venues. Audible voices, shadow figures in mirrors, and people who did leave out of fear. Now this place, we knew, was dark. But that feeling was more than enough. Because it didn't feel like fear, it felt like I was losing control. Like something else was trying to use my energy, and it felt invasive. And that, I can tell you, is a very different kind of experience. Now I've thought about that a lot since. I've tried to make sense of it, because it has created fear in me that's never really left. Now was it the environment? A quiet building full of history, where you're already expecting something to happen? Or was it psychological? The mind creating something because it doesn't like empty space or silence, or even uncertainty? Or was I dealing with something else entirely? Something external, that only needed a moment of stillness to be felt? Now maybe it saw something in me, and maybe it sensed vulnerability, and maybe I was more open to it than I'd realised. Now at the moment I don't really have an answer, and I'm not trying to give you one, but I know what it felt like. And I know for a brief moment I didn't fully feel in control of myself. And that has stayed with me far more than any noise, any shadow, or anything I could have captured on camera. And because sometimes the most unsettling experiences don't happen around you, you feel them inside of you. And the Gosport Isolation Hospital remains one of the most intense places I've ever visited. Not because of what I saw, but because of what I felt. It stayed with me as a place that carries something heavy and something difficult to explain. And a place that even now still feels connected to something darker and something I still don't fully understand. Now before you go, don't forget to follow us on Spotify and across social media. Every follow, every share and every message helps this community grow and keeps these stories alive. Now you'll find me, as usual, wherever the strange and the spiritual meet. Thank you for listening.